Hi, my name is Aya. You're watching Aya Reads, and the sun is shining, and this is the perfect day to talk about my favorite books I read this winter because spring is almost here, and I'm very excited about that. I have 8 books to talk about, so let's get started. I'm going to be talking about my favorites I read for December, January, and February. So in December, I only had one favorite, and it was Manacled by Senlin Yu. So actually, for those of you who don't know, Manacled is actually getting published traditionally. So obviously, she needs to do a lot of editing to make it its own story, but I am so excited about that. It's going to be called Alchemy, I'm pretty sure. Oh, Alchemized. And I'm pretty sure it's gonna be 2 books. But it's gonna be a while before that one gets published. So I would say definitely check out the original Manacled in between then, because Manacled is a fan fiction. It's a Draco and Hermione fan fiction, and it's a war fic, meaning it is very, very brutal. It's dark, it's bleak. Basically, this is a mix between Harry Potter and The Handmaid's Tale. So in this world, Voldemort has won, the rebellion and the Order of the Phoenix has been decimated, and they think that there's only one Order member left. But there's a problem. The true bloods, they cannot really have any kids, so they decide that they're going to use Muggle-born witches to repopulate the magical community. So that's where The Handmaid's Tale comes in. Every pure blood wizarding family gets one Muggle-born witch to do with what they will, but like the main focus is to have sex with them and get them pregnant. So rape them, honestly. Hermione gets given to Draco. He's the High Reeve. He's like the most important member apart from Voldemort in like the dark wizarding world. There's a reason why she gets given to Draco is also because he's a very good legitimate, so he can go into people's like memories and extract things in their brains to extract information, because they think that she knows who the last Order member is and where they are, but there's a problem with her memory. Like, she has repressed all that, so they think that Draco can get that information from her. This book is told in 3 different parts. It's the first part is the present, the middle part is all flashbacks, and then the third part is the present again. And in the flashbacks, you find out more information about Draco, about Hermione, about how like they may or may not know each other in the past. This is so beautiful. It is heartbreakingly beautiful. And I am very excited for Senlin Yu that she's been traditionally published, because she's an amazing author in my opinion. She just had the most beautiful lines, and the way she set this up perfectly. Like I said, this is very heavily based on Harry Potter and Handmaid's Tale, so obviously Alchemized is probably not going to be the same story as Manacled is, but I'm hoping that if she keeps the heart of the story intact, then it will be just as beautiful. I'm so excited for her. And Manacled was definitely one of my favorite books I read in December, and also I read in 2023 in general. So like I said, if you've not read Manacled yet, I would say don't wait for Alchemized. I would say read Manacled, because it is beautiful the way it is, and you don't necessarily have to have read Harry Potter or The Handmaid's Tale to appreciate this story. So I would say definitely check it out if you've not done so already. Now for January. January was a great month for reading because I had 6 favorites in January. Some of them I gave 4.5, but honestly I might end up changing the rating to a 5-star. Starting with God of Malice by Rena Kent. This one I gave 5 stars. This is the first book in her Legacy of God series. And you follow Killian and Glyndon. And this is a next gen series, but I've never read any Rena Kent, so you could read this without having read the other books. And there is like a family tree at the beginning. Killian is American, she's British, and they are from 2 very powerful, prominent families. And they're also in different schools, like rivaling schools. And one night, she's on top of this cliff and looking down. Her best friend has committed suicide, and she's like contemplating it. And then she slips and Killian ends up like preventing her from falling. But he is a psychopath, and he is fascinated by death and stuff like that. So he thinks that if she falls to her death, he can take like a masterpiece of a picture. So he's like taunting her and playing with her and telling her that he could let her slip and fall and get his masterpiece of a picture, or he can save her and she can do something for him. So she obviously chooses life, and then he gives her a choice. Either he can face fuck her or he can actually fuck her, so she chooses option A. If you've read Untouchable, it is very similar to that, especially this scene. And while she's doing that, she's not being that meek and docile about it, so he becomes intrigued by her and he starts like stalking her and following her around, and he becomes obsessed with her, and that is pretty much like their love story. It is like toxic, but toxic in the best way. I really enjoyed myself while reading this book. This was very much a dark romance, and this character, or like this hero, this like Killian is definitely unhinged, but unhinged in the best way. Like obviously I wouldn't like, I say this every time, I obviously don't want this in real life, but I do love reading about it in fictional, like in a fictional setting. And yeah, I would highly recommend it. Like I said, it is dark, and this character, like this hero, doesn't really redeem himself, so you have to be okay with that. But if you're okay with that, I would highly recommend it. What I also love about this book, I've not continued on with the series, but it does set up pretty much all the other romances very well. So that is also something to look forward to. Next is The Highwayman by Kerrigan Byrne. This is a historical dark romance. You follow Dorian, well, you follow Farah, and Farah, or Farah, I don't know how to pronounce that name, but when she was little, she fell in love with a boy named Dugan, and they actually handfested, meaning they are technically married, even though she was 8 and he was 10. So they met at this orphanage, and at this orphanage, one of the priests there almost assaulted her. So Dugan ends up killing him, and because of that he gets sent to jail, and he ends up dying in jail. And now we follow her 10 years later, and she's living as Dugan's widow. So she's like the widow of Widow Mackenzie. She also works at Scotland Yard. The beginning of this story, like after the flashbacks of her falling in love with Dugan, this notorious criminal gets arrested, and his name is Dorian Blackwell, the Black Heart of Benmore. He ends up kidnapping her actually, and telling her that he was in prison with Dugan, and he promised Dugan that he would find her and that he would get revenge for everything that happened to Dugan in prison. They end up getting married and falling in love, but Dorian, because of everything that happened to him in prison, he cannot stand touching people. So that is pretty much where the dark romance comes in. Obviously, I told you he kidnaps her, stuff like that, but also their sex scenes are pretty dark because she needs to be restrained for him to have sex with her. And that was so hot to me. That was so hot. I really loved this book. I loved Dorian, and I loved Farah as well. I love Farah. She was such a great heroine, and I really loved like the found family aspect of like the people that were living with them as well. This was so good. This is exactly what I love about dark romance and exactly what I love about historical romance, and I thought Kerrigan Byrne combined those two perfectly. If you've not read this book yet, I would highly recommend it. It is an older one. It was published in 2015, but I think it holds up very well, and definitely check this out if you've not done so already. Next is the one I gave 4.5, but I truly cannot stop thinking about this book, and like I said, I think I will end up changing the rating to 5 stars, and it's Pucked by Helena Hunting. This was such a good book. I was thoroughly entertained while reading this book. You follow Violet and Alex. Violet's stepbrother is a hockey player, and he just got transferred to this team in the NHL, and their captain is Alex, and they have this one night stand. He kind of becomes obsessed with her because she does not have any filter. She just constantly says what she thinks, and she's hilarious. And she's also intrigued by him because he's very sweet. He's like the consent king. Like every step of the way, he constantly asks for consent, but he also has a giant dick that she's also kind of obsessed with. And I thought this book was funny. I really loved Violet. I loved Alex as well. And I really loved how he was like the perfect combination of obsessive, possessive, but also very, very sweet. He was adorable. Like he's like especially comparing him to Killian. Like Killian is a hero that he needs to stay away from me in real life. Alex is a hero that I would love if he was my boyfriend. Like he was so sweet. So the reasons why I ended up giving this 4.5 stars as opposed to 5 stars were that it was a little bit too long. Violet was unnecessarily slut-shaming Puck bunnies, but to be honest, this was also published around 2015, and maybe it was more normal at that time. But like I said, now almost 2 months later, I am still finding myself thinking about this book. I remember these characters vividly in my mind. I only remember like the good things about this book, so maybe this should be 5 stars because I really, really did love it. In fact, I'm just gonna change the rating right now. Yep, changed it. It is a 5 in my heart. So moving on is House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. And you might be thinking, why are you adding rereads? This was not a reread for me. When this book came out, I was in a giant reading slump and I never got around to it. And then eventually, I guess I wanted to reread the first book, and that just felt like such a burden because these books are very long that I just kept putting it off and putting it off. And when she announced House of Flame and Shadow, I just resigned myself to waiting. The plan was to actually read this book in 2023, but I just didn't get around to it. I really love this book. I love Sarah J. Maas. This was a great installment. I really loved Rune in the first book, and I felt like Bryce treated him so horribly. So I really love the fact that this book, we got more of Rune. We got like a love story with him and another character that I really, really loved. So this is obviously a favorite. Sarah J. Maas is one of my favorite authors. And of course, I knew I was going to love this. The only question was, when was I going to get around to it? And I'm glad I did. A part of me is sad that I read this in the same year I read House of Flame and Shadow, because like this, I cannot give it its full due because I read the third book so close to reading this one. But like, having said all that, I still really loved it. It's still 5 stars. I know I'm gonna love everything that Sarah J. Maas writes. So like I said, not surprising. And a good thing is this book does end on a cliffhanger, and I am glad that I did not have to wait 2 years to finally read the third book like a lot of other people had to. Another book that I technically gave 4.5 stars, but now looking back on it, probably should be 5 stars. And it's Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. So this is the first part of Johnny and Shannon's story. So Johnny is this rugby player, and this takes place in high school. So he's still in high school at Thoman University, but he also plays for like the National Rugby League or something. Like, he's a professional rugby player. And you follow Shannon, who has this horrible, horrible home life. Like, her dad is an alcoholic. He's very abusive to pretty much everybody in their family. And she's also severely bullied at school. So they don't have a whole lot of money, and Thoman University is pretty expensive. But one day her mom is just wants to save her, so she actually transfers her to Thoman University because she does have 2 friends that she knew in like primary school that go to Thoman University. So she gets there, and on her first day, Johnny is angry at something, so he angrily kicks the rugby ball, and it accidentally ends up hitting her because she's walking on the field, even though she's not supposed to. So that is basically their meet cute. He goes with her to the principal's office and is, trying to take care of her. And ever since that moment, they are constantly being drawn together. And he's very intrigued by her, and obviously she's very intrigued by him as well. She knows that she cannot be with him because of her father and because of her home life. I truly definitely understand why this book is so beloved. A lot of people love this series. I could definitely see why. I fell in love with this story, even though it is very long, which is one of the reasons why I docked a half star, because like, if you really think about it, the first book is about 600 pages, the second book is about 600 pages. So it's combined and it's 1,200 pages. And this is technically just a contemporary romance. Like, I know she has a lot going on in her home life, but I am still convinced that she could have told this story in like 800 pages as opposed to 1,200. Like, I'm fine with it being a little bit longer, but this long, I don't know. Like, I still have not finished their story yet because I'm currently reading Keeping 13. So I might change my mind, but I am still convinced that it's a little bit too long. But obviously the upside of it being too long is that I truly do feel like I know these characters through and through. Like, not just Johnny, not just Shannon, but also the side characters. Like, I really fell in love with Joey. Gibbs is one I feel like I know very well. Claire too. And they are the ones that end up getting other books in the series as well. So book 3 and 4, you follow Joey and his girlfriend Aoife, and then book 5 is Gibbs and Claire, and that one comes out this year actually. I love how obsessive Johnny was, and it wasn't just his obsessiveness with Shannon, it was also like he has an obsessive personality in general, and that in the first book you definitely got to see that with rugby. Like, his obsession with rugby. I liked that she made him out to be that way, so that when he becomes obsessive with Shannon, it is very consistent with his character. Shannon just broke my heart, and not just Shannon, Joey especially broke my heart, so I cannot wait to read his story as well. I just wanted to hug him. And there's actually this quote that I'm just going to read to you about Joey. All three of them went straight to Joey. She's talking about the three little brothers that they have, because he was our protector. He was the reason we were all in one piece. He was our hero. I just like, he just broke my heart. Joey already has my whole heart and soul, so I cannot wait to read his story. But going back to Johnny and Shannon, I love their meet cutes. I love their little moments in his car, at his house. I really love them. I just thought they were very cute together. The upside of it being very long is that a lot of characters are fully fleshed out already, so obviously that is a good thing. I'm still debating. I'm not that clear on whether this should be 5 stars. I think I'm gonna wait until I finish Keeping 13 to see whether or not I'm gonna change my rating for Binding 13, but for now it is definitely a favorite. Just like with Puck, I cannot stop thinking about Johnny and Shannon, and maybe a part of that is because I'm reading Keeping 13 and I am taking my time with it, because after I finished Binding 13, I actually could not really start Keeping 13 because House of Flame and Shadow was going to come out in like 2 days, and I knew that I was not going to be reading a 600-page book in 3 days, especially knowing that I probably was going to do a whole lot of reading to try and finish House of Flame and Shadow as soon as possible. But since Binding 13 did end on such a big cliffhanger, and since I did really love their story, I did end up starting Keeping 13, even though I was not really technically supposed to. So that should tell you enough about how much I love Binding 13. So moving on to February. I had 2 favorites in February. The first one was The Rest of the Story by Tel Bauer. So this is my first Tel Bauer, will 100% not be my last. This book you follow Morgan and Shay. Morgan is well, they're both hockey players, but Morgan gets transferred to the worst team in the NHL, and it's basically a death sentence for your career. It's basically where you're going to play your last games before you retire. But when he gets there, he realizes the reason that they are the worst team is because they have a very, very abusive captain, and the coach and everybody else has been turning a blind eye to his abuse. So the teammates actually arranged for Morgan to be there because they knew that he would not stand for that and that he would probably save them. And that is exactly what he does in the first 24 hours that he gets there. He ends up becoming captain, and he ends up falling in love with one of the rookies there, whose name is Shay. And he's a different type of rookie. He actually finished his degree before he went into the NHL. Yeah, he's a little bit older. I really love this book. First of all, I love Tel Bauer's writing. I really love these characters. And it's not just the romance, which I really, really love their romance. I truly believed in their romance, and I truly believed in their HEA, and I do think that they're going to be together for the rest of their lives. What I also really loved is the found family aspect. I loved this underdog team building themselves up from the ashes. Like, I loved reading that, and I think he did that perfectly. And I truly was rooting for this team. Like, at points, I just got emotional seeing them finally win after everything they've been through. I could read anything that Tel writes. Like, I know that he has written another hockey romance where you see a couple of those characters in here, and I cannot wait to read that one. I cannot wait to read You and Me, which I know Jen really loved. If you've not read a Tel Bauer, I would highly recommend it. I would recommend starting with this one because this was heartbreakingly beautiful. Like, this was so good. And obviously this is his own voices. And then last but most certainly not least is a book I have mentioned a couple times. It's House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 3rd book in her Crescent City series. And I ended up finishing this in February. Gave it 5 stars. It's obviously a favorite of the year. I loved it. This was very much action-packed. Like, things were constantly happening. Usually with Sarah J. Maas, sometimes her book starts off a little bit slow and then the action happens and then it's constant action. This book felt like that was that way throughout the entire book. Like, constantly things were happening and she was constantly switching back and forth, and like every chapter of this book something interesting was happening. So I really loved it, and it was definitely a favorite of the month. So yes, these were my 8 favorite books I read during the winter season. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you've read any of the books that I talked about, and if you agree with me that you also love them. Or if you disagree with me, that's fine too. And I would also really love to know some of your favorites that you read this winter. So obviously I'm talking about December, January, and February. Definitely leave that in the comments below. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know by leaving a like if you did. And thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.